even if your targeting isn't, amazing, Facebook can find the right people if your content is clearly geared for a certain audience. It will deduce that, which is amazing to me.
This is why we talk about like building lookalike audiences off of like 75% video viewers, as a metric, because that's someone who deeply engaged with a piece of content that if I'm building a lookalike audience off of this, then I'm going to be finding more people that are like my people, not like Nirvana's people or not like Billie Eilish's people,
right.
Your people. That's why your content can play such a big role. And that's why we look, kind of at those deeper metrics. The sauce is in that deeper engagement and what that does to, the machine learning.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Entrepreneur.io.
What's up, indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I am your host, Corinne Campbell. With me is Jack McCarthy. And today we are talking about something that is it's a trick. Well, it's not a trick. Is it, Jack?
A secret.
It's a secret? Is it a hack? I'm only for conversations if it's a secret hack to game the algorithm. That's the only discussions I'm willing to have. So is it that?
Here, let's break it down like this. It's a secret in the fact that nobody talks about it this way, and it's a hack in that it does impact the algorithm, but maybe not in the way that you think.
Right. Yeah, definitely. I mean,
what could we be talking about?
I know. And we're not trying to be like uber cheeky with you guys. It's just, I think there's
a little.
Right. Well, as people who have run a lot of ads and talk a lot about, the nuances of advertising, in the end, there's a really basic set of basically assets in your campaign that have nothing to do with how well you know how to advertise. And obviously Jack is someone who has a lot of experience running ads on great offers, great content, great context, right? As well as running ads on stuff that isn't so much. And
bad offers with no context.
Yeah, exactly. with terrible content. And it's funny because every time that we hear feedback where it's like, oh, I tried this, but it's not working. Or even some of our fellow YouTubers who will claim that Facebook ads never broke anybody. I'm always prompted to comment like, well, maybe you didn't get this tool to work, and it's probably not because you suck at advertising as much as there was something wrong with the rest of it, right? And I think this is really it's difficult. It's more difficult because it's very similar to our it depends kind of answer for everything, in that it's very subjective and it can be difficult. It's not like if we teach you a strategy, it will automatically work. It's reliant on these other things. And so that's what we're going to talk about today, because I think we have to kind of assume that if something's not working, it could be the ads, but it could be something else. And there's a lot of different things that could be. So I'd like Jack to kick this off because this was his idea. And it's his idea because it's so, so relevant to the conversation. So why don't you take us down the rabbit hole, Jack?
Yeah, let's kick it off. So one of the big questions that we get a lot of, and I mean, this has been an age-old question when it comes to Facebook advertising for, quite a long time. It's the question of, well, how do I create the perfect targeting? How do I target my ideal fan? What if the interest or the artist that I'm trying to target that I just know if I target their fans that they'll love me? What if I can't target them, right? What if I can't target Billie Eilish is an easy target?
Oh my gosh, the number of emails we've gotten.
Pun intended.
Yeah. The number of emails we've gotten about how Billie Eilish is not targetable is a lot of them.
So we get those kinds of questions really, really often. And we've gotten them, I would say, with a higher frequency over the last year and a half, 2 years than we previously had even, which is really interesting. And a lot of that has to do with the way that the machine learning on the Facebook ads platform has evolved, and how Facebook has seemingly, for, reasons that none of us can say with any accuracy, hasn't cataloged interest, especially artist-based interest, in quite the same way. And a lot of that has to do with, the machine learning inside of Facebook getting better and better and better, and giving us the ability to do broad targeted advertising based on broader interests. But also, we don't really know why. At the end of the day, we don't really know why an artist like Billie Eilish isn't targetable. But what
I have a
do...
theory.
Oh, I want to hear your theory.
Can I share my theory? Well, first off, obviously Facebook wants people to advertise. And if you advertise within Facebook IG versus advertising in Google Ads, it's a far less complex setup. It's way easier to spend your money with the Facebook Business Manager. And I think that that's by design. I think it's, wise of Facebook to be like, look, this is accessible. Anyone can do it. You can spend your money. That's why they started bringing in page boosts, to get people accustomed to spending money in advertising. That's why the Instagram promote button exists, is so that it makes advertising just, dummy proof in theory, except it's not dummy proof. And so I think that every change that I see Facebook roll out, whether it's changing how they optimize or, changing, for example, lookalikes didn't used to be limited to 1,000, right? You could make a lookalike off it pretty much anything, way back in the day. And I think that they did that because it's like, look, if you can't even give us 1,000 people, we're not going to be able to optimize for this, and so they were kind of throttling the mistakes that inexperienced marketers could use. And I think that that's where a lot of this, more niche targeting was removed, because Facebook is like, look, if you're looking at audiences that are, hundreds of thousands to millions, you don't know what the most common interest is among these people. If you are targeting down that far, you're probably just limiting the capability of the machine to find you the people that you want to find. And
Absolutely.
So I think that that's maybe why it's been removed, is essentially it's like, look, if you're getting that niche in it, you probably don't actually know what you're doing, because, more experienced marketers know that letting a machine do its job, especially one that's now become more and more sophisticated over time, it's going to do a better job than any of us could ever project or perceive, or if we were doing it ourselves and had to choose these things. So that's my theory. My theory is that a lot of these targeting options have been removed because if you actually targeted down that finite, the machine wouldn't be able to do its job. You wouldn't trust Facebook to spend your money anymore, and you'd stop advertising. So that's my theory.
I like that theory a lot. I mean, it's definitely in line with how I feel too. Because,
cool. We agree.
Yeah, totally. I think like you said, as Facebook's machine learning gets smarter and smarter, and has tons of data on all of its users,
they're pulling a pickle jar.
Exactly.
Gimme.
Exactly.
I got it. Gimme it. Gimme.
Yeah. Exactly.
Let me get that for you.
But I think, this question does kind of beg an answer. And I think that something that a lot of musicians, a lot of folks in our community, and I've had a lot of conversations like this where people ask me like, oh, well, I think my fans would be, I think it would be perfect if I could target XYZ and narrow it by, ABC brand. I know that that's my micro niche, and I want to target them perfectly with my content, and that's going to be great. Well, here's the thing, and this comes up with Google Ads as well. You can think that all you want, but let's say those targeting options are gone. Platforms change, things get pulled. Like you said, Corinne, like some of these targeting options have been removed. We've seen a lot of that over the past 2 years with Facebook removing some detailed targeting options. So what do you do in that case? And I think that this is kind of like the targeting secret that a lot of people don't think about. It's actually your content, right? The content that you're putting out in front of people. So let's just talk about top of funnel, because That's a lot of where this conversation comes up, is like, I'm targeting, a cold audience for the very first time, people who don't know who I am. I want to get new fans listening to me, and I want to target, whoever I want, people that are other artists that sound like me, other bands that maybe I've toured with, so on and so forth, you name it. People do all sorts of hoops they jump through for this kind of perfect targeting. But what's not often talked about enough, I think, is what do you do when, either when you're in that position that you can do that, or when you're not. Maybe you're just working with broad targeting. Like, let's look to a world where all you could target is like pop music or rock music or something like that. How are you standing out? Well, your content is going to be the thing that will do the targeting work for you. And I think that that's really overlooked and kind of misunderstood, because a lot of people think like, oh, I can just target perfectly, slap my music video out there with some out now copy and, be good to go. But that's just not true at all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, especially if you're talking about cold traffic, right? With warm traffic, it's a little different, right? Like maybe they're waiting for that drop, and this is how they find out about it. But other than that, there's nothing to consume there. It's like, oh, I really like that picture of an owl. I'm going to click through and listen to music, So I think that's something that we, and same thing with like stock imagery and stock video, it is, those libraries are getting better, right? There's more and more stuff in stock libraries that don't look like a, Viagra commercial, which is great. But at the same time, it still has a look to it. That's their job. Their job is to have a certain look. And if that look isn't perfectly aligned with what your look should be, like people are still going to feel that inauthenticity,
Right.
Is that a word? Inauthenticity?
It is, yeah.
Okay, I kind of stumbled on it. So I was like, well, maybe that's...
I like it.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm an artist.
Inauthenticity. It is kind of a mouthful to say.
Yeah, it is. Creative liberties, whatever. I'm an artist. I can make up whatever I want. But in any case, that's why those things tend not to do as well. And this is where I think it's, the plight of being an artist is crazy, because it's like I was talking about when I was spending every breathing, waking moment on Clubhouse, is that in a lot of these rooms, these people who are in the industry would tell people, well, your music needs to be good. You have to have a good product. And it's like, as an artist, I think all my stuff's good. My stuff's great. Right. Like, I wouldn't put it out if I didn't think it was good, And so sometimes when I'm dealing with ads, I feel like my content is good, but you know what? It's, even if I pivot targeting a couple times and whatever, if it's not doing well, guess what? That content, it's either not good or it's just not communicating the thing that needs to be communicated to that audience for them to do whatever it is I'm trying to get them to do,
Exactly.
And so I think that's really a good point, is that it's very difficult to be objective, but this is where the ad platform could be telling you something, Well,
here's a really interesting case that I think it even goes beyond, like, it goes a step deeper than just like the good music or the good content kind of talking point. Is something that we see a lot of is artists ask like, oh, I'm running ads on Facebook or whatever, and I'm seeing a skew towards an older age demographic than I think is right for my music. And that's fine. Like, that definitely can happen and does happen.
Welcome to my life, friends.
Right. It can happen and it does happen. But, and this is a big, and I think we've talked about this on the podcast too, but this is a big but. Making assumptions about that and saying, oh, that's just the machine, optimizing in that direction because it's cheapest. You can make that assumption, especially if you've got, a lot of data on your fans. But a lot of people jump to that conclusion before they really should, in my opinion,
right.
without looking at the actual content. And Jesse and I, Basic Printer and I, have talked about this quite a bit, in that, he's run traffic on all sorts of videos, and it's kind of like really, he'll die on this hill to be like, if you want your video on in a Facebook ad or an Instagram ad to resonate and get engagement from a younger audience, then you need to make content that resonates with that audience.
Exactly.
Like you said, it's the wrong messaging that's not appealing to the kind of people that you want to hit. So even if you're targeting, artists that are similar to you that, really have a younger demographic, if your content's not spot on and resonating with that kind of fan or that kind of new listener, well, then it's no wonder you're getting an age skew in a direction that you think isn't a good fit.
Absolutely.
Whether it is I'm not going to get into whether it is or actually isn't a good fit for your business. That's a whole different rabbit hole. But it's about putting the right type of content in front of the right people. And I know that that's something that we go through that a lot inside the Fan Finder method. And for any of you guys listening that don't know what the Fan Finder method is, it's a video ad blueprint training that we have inside of the Indie Pro library. And it walks through, quite a number of different types of video examples that we see consistently work really well in video advertising for growing an audience. And it's not just slapping your music video onto a Facebook ad and hoping that it works out if you just dial in the targeting, right?
Right.
That's what we're talking about, is really looking into like, what are pillar content pieces that I can use that will generate me listeners predictably in the types of demographics, interests, psychographics that I'm really looking to hit. And looking into how your content plays a role in that, I think, is really, really important, especially as these platforms change and evolve.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, if you need proof of this, right? Because I think it's very, again, it's subjective, right? And it's difficult to be objective about yourself. And even like for your friends and family, if you're like, hey, what do you think about this? It's all kind of, littered with their opinion of what you do or how you sound, which is true for every individual user. Even the people that I get in my free plus shipping and handling funnel, some of them are like, oh yeah, this is totally rock. And some of them are like, this is totally pop punk. And some of them are totally, like some people are like, this is really poppy, for my taste. And so it's just, it can really skew a lot. But when I was working on the greatest hits release, I have a whole disc of remixes. And I know I've mentioned it before, but that content performed completely differently because I was looking at, all of these friggin' chill, down-tempo, sad rap playlists and their content and the artists that were on there to be like, okay, well, this is kind of what that demographic looks like. And it was actually such a cool exercise for me because I had to create that content, right? It wasn't a client. I wasn't trying to guide a client to do it. Like, I was creating this content. I knew that it was different from, my typical scene. Because even when I'm doing, younger focused content on the rock side of stuff, it's still, it's very, very different. And so this was a really great exercise in understanding how these different components work. And I didn't have that skew when I was doing that advertising. I was looking at the content that people in that space, especially younger artists, were creating, and used that as inspo to create my content for this particular album. And I didn't see a skew in the older male demographic on video views. It skewed younger. So that, that was particularly interesting. I've also, there are some videos where I, get all gussied up and look like I want to be in Evanescence or something.
Glamorous.
And it's dramatic and whatever. And then there's other stuff that's more candid and sweaty and like from a show.
Yeah.
And the way that audiences skew in that department, it differs a lot. And so I think that's something that it takes a lot of work as an artist to create all of this different kind of content and be objective about yourself and then it's a lot. But I think if you push yourself to create some very different content and serve them in all of these different audiences, you'll start seeing that you're not just relegated to like, oh, these are the people who watch video, you know? And that was something that I learned as well, because for a while I was like, man, it's just video views. I'm just always going to get this demo. And it's like, well, yeah, if you don't change your content and your messaging, then you will, because that's who that appeals to, you know?
There's such an easy, I think there's such an easy like comparison that you could even make here. Like, you know, zooming out 30,000 feet, like the type of audience that, let's say you're a rock artist like you, Corinne, like the type of audience that you're going to garner if you were to run, you know, Cold Traffic on a fan finder that is an acoustic song, maybe a piano ballad that you play, versus, you know, a single shot live show, you know, full band type, like high octane video, the difference in audience that you're going to garner, even if the targeting that you use is exactly the same, you're probably going to hit different pockets of people in those interest categories, you know, solely because of the type of video that you're putting, the type of music that's in that video, and also the copy that you put together. I mean, that's like the easiest example to point to, I think. And that's great. You know, that says to me, like something a lot of people ask me is like, oh, like if I'm in a band and I do an acoustic video, do you think I should like change my targeting up to, you know, be appropriate for an acoustic song? And my answer is like, well, yeah, maybe, like, you know, maybe that acoustic song was inspired from, I don't know, like Led Zeppelin or something like that, versus, you know, something that you would normally target under kind of like your usual brand. So yeah, I mean, if you have some, you know, specific inspo that you wanted to target based on that, sure. But otherwise, like, I would say use the same targeting and that you've been using and see what kind of people it pulls out of it, because these audiences are huge, right?
Right. Well, and that's the cool thing that I've experienced is really in doing exactly that. I stopped targeting artists just for my personal ad account a long time ago. And that's because I've now spent almost $100,000 on my ad account in its history, which I know sounds crazy, but I've been advertising a long time. And so at this point, the ad account is like, I know. You know, it's well seasoned, you know, and sometimes you know, even if the content is different, like even with the remix stuff where the content was really different and the sound was really different, there's still a kind of person that is attracted to my personality and to the way I talk to people. And there's a lot of other commonalities that aren't necessarily, you know, something that is so niche. And so I found that even targeting alt rock with that content caught a lot of crossover. It caught a lot of people who like alt rock, but also liked this content. And that's great for me, because then those fans weren't totally lost when they came over and realized, oh, that's the only thing she's ever made that sounds like that, you know, so I'm done.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah.
And so a lot of times I will just use alt rock, but the way that, you know, I have like a long, like a 7.5 minute documentary, like biopic kind of piece of content that shows a lot of stuff about my military experience coming up, and there's like some childhood stuff in there and just my journey as a musician. So that's some content that I have that performs very differently from like the fast cut edits of like live performance and touring life, and that performs very differently with a very different audience for when I'm just doing acoustic. Like when I write my rock songs, they start on piano. And that's actually where I started music, you know, at all, was just like playing music at home on a piano and singing to it. And so that content appeals to a completely different age group and typical demographic. So, but all of those, I just use alt rock in Greenlight Countries as my targeting.
Yep.
And from there, it just kind of spawns into different places. And it does take some learning, you know, the machine has to learn. It's like, okay, this isn't exactly the same as everything else she's advertised. So it's not just going to be everyone who looks exactly like who's interacted with this account before. And it is smart enough to pivot, you know, and it's been exceedingly impressive to me that that works. Like machine learning kind of blows my mind a little bit. It's so weird, but yeah, I think that's the best way to figure it out is like, what are some contrasting, so whether you're a solo artist or a band or, a creator of a different kind, what happens when you do something in black and white that's, maybe more down tempo? What happens when you do it in vivid color with a lot of energy, and, what happens then? And looking at the results with the same targeting, that's a very educational, productive split test to run in a campaign.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's like all those points you raised and the different types of content that you outlined. I think that really speaks to ways to kind of dial in your content. I mean, we haven't even touched on copy, but those are ways to dial in your, the type of content that you're running to get new fans based on what you know about your current fans, or just, who you are as an artist, and then kind of putting it out there. That's how you dial it in to speak to your people, Mm-hmm. I also think this, another largely unaddressed point is like, or, underutilized point that a lot of people don't think about is in Facebook ads, like the machine learns based on your content. So when you put out things that, a certain type of person is going to dig, it's going to find more of those people as it optimizes. And a lot of people don't think about that in terms of their targeting. They just think like, oh, like I'm targeting Nirvana fans and it's going to find me more people that are like Nirvana fans. No. Right. I mean, yes, but also no. It's going to find you people that dig what you just put out there. So it's going to find more people that are engaging with who you are. And that's why your content, I think, is so important, especially when it comes to broad interests.
I mean, in theory, you could advertise to people who like, I think Jesse was saying that one of his tests for one of his funnels was for his cold stuff was to run to like people who like brightly colored hair or hair dye or something like that.
Yeah.
And it's like, there's no reason why that should work, except that it does, because Facebook is still using the information from your ad, from your copy, from your content. I mean, and if, we talk about all the time how bots are a lot more advanced than people think. In fact, I called Jack about this. I was so excited because I was running an ad.
This is a great story.
Oh my gosh, it's ridiculous. I'm such a nerd. It's so clear what a mega nerd I am. But I put an ad up, and I happened to have my Google Analytics present on another monitor. And so I was working on a campaign, and I, went publish on an ad, and immediately my analytics lit up with all of these different users in Mountain View, California. And I wasn't running any ads to that page outside of the one that I had just published for review. So I was like, well, that is so weird. And as I looked at the activity, like there were 18 users there, and then a bunch of them dropped off. And this was for a landing page for basically a bridge page to streaming. Yes, I was running advertising for streaming, I'll admit it. But it was a landing page. And so there were, first off, all of these profiles that landed on that page. And then over the next few minutes, there were clicks on the different buttons. And my theory is that there were basically these bot profiles that Facebook sent out to peruse the content, the text and the photo content and all of that of the page itself, and then had different bot users clicking on these buttons to ensure they were valid URLs. There wasn't any, spam or malware in it. And that was for a simple landing page. So then I started watching when I started publishing ads. And essentially, if something was that simple, where it was a landing page and a click through on a button, it went through like that, especially if it was an image, right, in the ad, and then there was just an image on the page and buttons. Ads go through really fast. But if it's a, landing page with a lot of context and copy and, imagery and video and all of this, it takes longer. And so I started to see a trend where if I had more content on the page or had more actions that one could take on the page, it would take longer to get through review because these bots basically evaluate your content. So my point is that it's not just going to the page and reading the copy like an SEO bot does. It's actually like gauging things about your imagery, about the content, about the nature of the content. And dude, it is crazy, like AI in general makes my brain want to explode, but it's actually looking at your content, which is why it's so important for it to be on point. Even if your targeting isn't, amazing, Facebook can find the right people if your content is clearly geared for a certain audience. It will deduce that, which is amazing to me.
Totally. I mean, businesses and brands do this all the time. A marketer that I really like, Max Finn, talks about this. He calls it the idea of reverse targeting, he calls it. It's fantastic. And you can really build this is why we talk about building lookalike audiences off of 75% video viewers, as a metric, because that's someone who deeply engaged with a piece of content that if I'm building a lookalike audience off of this, then I'm going to be finding more people that are like my people, not like Nirvana's people or not like Billie Eilish's people, your people. That's why your content can play such a big role. And that's why we look, kind of at those deeper metrics beyond just through plays or, page engagement. Not that we don't use those, they're useful, but the sauce is in that deeper engagement and what that does to, the machine learning,
right?
The algorithm.
Yeah. And it's funny because this is why even in the green light warmth boosting training, which is also in R&D Pro area, but where you're essentially just putting light spend on your posts to increase your reach, so that people who engage with your stuff 6 months ago, even if they don't follow you, are still, seeing this new content. And the real benefit to that isn't just that they're seeing it. It brings them back into the fold if they have been out for a while, but also it's giving the machine signals, right? You're sending an ad to someone, say they engage with your Instagram 6 months ago and haven't been back, whether it's because you haven't advertised or because they were off Instagram, which is unlikely, but could be. But in any case, they haven't engaged with your stuff for 6 months. And then you show them an ad and they get in there and watch it if it's a video, or they like it or they comment or whatever, or message it to a friend, right? And when that happens, it gives the machine a signal. Hey, even though this person hasn't seen content from this creator, they were just shown an ad, and that makes them more eligible to see your stuff organically. Because it's looking at the person who's consuming or interacting with said content, whether it's an ad or not an ad. So it's really, the content is so important. I mean, I can't even express enough, what that does when you realize that your reach is down, even organically on these different channels. Yeah, part of it is that they want you to advertise. You're paying to, have your house on someone else's real estate. But the other thing is that people aren't engaging with your content, or the right people aren't engaging with your content. And so
spot on.
It's just
spot on.
It's really incredible how much that impacts what's happening.
Well, something that we didn't even touch on, just, as a quick aside, when it comes to advertising to grow a fan base, it's great that you can run ads and get cheap views and cheap clicks. That's awesome if you got, that dialed into your system. But here's something that I think also goes ignored is what happens next for people? What are they seeing when they get to your Facebook page, to your Instagram profile, to your website, to TikTok, wherever it is that they're going? What's happening when they get there? Are they impressed by it? What is the content looking like in those places? That's, kind of the next step in the journey for a listener, is digging in a little bit deeper. And if there's nothing there, then, or if it's, just straight up bad or doesn't make sense, doesn't resonate anymore, then that's another place where all of that money that you spend and that effort that you spend at the very, at the very, very top kind of goes to waste. you're not continuing that process of targeting and refining your fan base and getting them engaged if they don't have, cool stuff to hang on to once they, step into your world, so to speak.
Absolutely. And it's something that has actually because I theorize about stuff all the time. I think I'm so smart. But one thing that I've actually kind of been evaluating as, testing more of the green light warmth boosting, because that really started with a theory. And I'm like, this is going to impact organic reach in the future. I just know it, but I hadn't tracked it close enough to have data on it. Right. And so I started looking at the ratio of not people who have interacted with posts, but my stories, because you can't advertise your existing story content in the same way, right? Where people are seeing that original post. And so I was like, well, how many people are seeing my stories that I'm not advertising, versus just like a standard post, which in theory is a different placement. It's a different type of content. In theory, it's separated enough where I could get some reasonable data about who is seeing what and when and whatever. And my stories they've doubled. I run green light warmth boosting constantly on everything that I post. But I also do I have a content catch up campaign that is running all of my old Instagram posts to the newer people in the fold who have just purchased or just come on the mailing list and maybe haven't interacted with me on Instagram at all. Maybe I found them on Facebook, or maybe Facebook found them on Facebook is really what I should say.
Yeah.
And it's like, how is that impacting? And of course, this is all inference, so I can't show you direct attribution, but my stories reach has tripled, doubled in. Well, it's doubled in reach and tripled in the engagement. So whether it's the reactions I'm getting, the messages I'm getting, and guys, it took me a long time to actually track all of this stuff. But I was making a note every day of how these different stories were being interacted with and the feedback I was getting. And so it's interesting because I wasn't advertising to warm traffic in stories. I was only advertising in warm traffic with posts. But it still impacted the organic reach on other portions of my content. So I think that that's really interesting, and why it is key to not take shortcuts in your content. I think you could probably get away with having crappy targeting more than you can get away with having crappy content.
Yeah, say it louder for the people in the back. I couldn't agree more. And that's the thing. We might be going into an era where targeting is getting quote unquote crappier for some people, or more broad. If anything, to be honest with you, I think that it's going to bring out the artists who are smart marketers that know the truth, that the true targeting is what's happening after you press publish,
right, exactly.
And what people are seeing when they see your ads. That's really where the sauce is, in my opinion. That's going to be the thing that differentiates you, especially when platforms change. We've been talking a lot in the past 2 weeks about Facebook's audience insights is changing, might even be going away altogether. It's transitioning over to business insights. Audience insights is, a tool where you can dive in and look at similar interest based on pages that you look at. So you might say I want to know what other interests do Nelly's fans have, right? And you can type his name in, and you can look and see, what other pages do they like? What Instagram do they follow? Where do they hang out? What do they like? That's audience insights. Facebook announced that they're, they're removing audience insights on July 1st of this year. And they're changing it to business suite insights, which, might end up looking exactly like audience insights and might do exactly the same things, which is, it's great if it does. And if it doesn't, then we pivot. But we might be going into a space where we're working with broader audiences or less options. I think that's, a real reality, especially with the iOS 14 changes that are happening.
Don't get me started.
Yeah, we're going to see more and more of this kind of stuff as data privacy gets, more and more in the spotlight.
Right.
I think, on the flip side, a lot of people say like, oh, the coolest thing about YouTube ads is that you can get super granular in your targeting. I mean, we've talked about this on the episode where we did the Google Ads expose. So I'll put that in the show notes so you guys can check it out. But, something we talk about in that is like, you could do all of the great targeting that you want in Google Ads, and, you're limited to certainly the impressions that those targeting options are getting. That's
right.
One limitation that a lot of people don't think about. But another thing is, and what a lot of artists don't get about YouTube ads is it relies on your content just as much, if not more, because it's so interruptive, and to be honest, like I have never seen a YouTube ad from an artist that I thought was really worth advertising. I was like, oh, this is a waste of money. Like, sure, you're getting views on your channel and maybe picking up a couple subscribers, but that's about it. It's probably not doing a whole lot for you.
Yeah, definitely.
I think like the content that a lot of musicians use on YouTube ads just really falls short. And I think that that's one of the challenges of that platform. So again, like this is a flip side. You've got all the targeting options in the world, and I still see advertising content that just doesn't really make sense to have there.
Right.
Like I don't want to see the sunset in your music video as a pre-roll ad when I'm trying to watch, I don't know, a production tutorial or something like that.
Yeah.
Why would I'm skipping that right away.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, it's really interesting. I mean, and here's the thing, right? Like, I think a guest that we had on this podcast way back, his name's Steve Knopper, and he wrote an amazing book about how the music industry basically froze when the digital age came around. Napster came through and they were like, OMG, we need to sue everyone who's involved in, downloading MP3s, and they fought it hard and they lost, and so slowly over the last, 15, 20 years, like they've slowly come around, and now streaming is everything, and CDs are ancillary income, and they've really pivoted, but it took them a long time to embrace the change, and frankly they missed out on setting the standards for that pivot in the industry. Instead of them saying like, nope, you're right guys, that's a great thing, and here's how we want to influence that space, they lost the opportunity to influence it because they fought it. So in the same way, as these changes roll out, in Facebook and in the ads platform and in targeting and whatever, the thing that is always going to be king is your content, and everything else you can just change with it, right? But your content is what's going to influence how this moves, especially for you personally, let alone as a movement of independent creators. And so I think that's something to really, focus in more on that. How can your content be captivating and really snag people's attention and snag the attention of people that, are like you or would like your stuff,
For sure.
I think that's the key.
We talk about this a lot, like the idea that like you should be making videos, like let's just call them music videos. You should be making music videos that represent some kind of cultural moment for someone when they see it. That this is a moment in time where they're like, wow, I just discovered something that I think is fire and I think is just for me. It makes them want to raise their hand, and, it's the first step in them falling in love with you as an artist. That's the kind of thing that you want to be working towards. That's the kind of content that you want to be building and creating. And, that takes time and a lot of creativity and a lot of effort. You can put mediocre content out there and get, cheap video views, for what it's worth. But if that's not creating that kind of spark, then it's not really doing its job.
Right. Well, if you wouldn't do it with your music, don't do it with your content, because at this point it's synonymous in the creator landscape. You have to, you can't be like, oh, I don't really feel like doing video. Trust me, I've lived that life. I hate doing video. I'm not good at it. It's expensive. I don't own any of the equipment. I definitely don't have any editing skills. I'm with you, but it's part of the space that we're in. And Just like you wouldn't be like, oh, well, I can just record my acoustic guitar with a 58, even though the AC's on and I don't have any like audio isolation. It'll be fine. You wouldn't do that, you know, and you can't shortcut with the content either. And that's just, it's a harsh reality for any of us who don't feel like learning how to do all that stuff. You got to do it anyway, you know? It's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I think we're going into an era where this is going to become more and more important. And you know, the type of the artists that are going to stand out, especially in the ad space, are going to be the ones that really work to put together, you know, front-end content, especially front-end content, I want to say, like especially front-end content that makes those, you know, kind of big hit moments. And when I say hit moments, I don't mean like a hit single or anything like that. I mean big hit moments in that you've got something that's really generating interest and not just getting, you know, cheap views or in some cases less than cheap views. It's really building the start of an experience for people.
Absolutely.
I think that's more and more what's going to set apart, you know, the artists that can advertise effectively and use their content to support their targeting efforts versus the ones that need to rely on, you know, quote unquote perfect targeting that doesn't really exist outside of your content anyway. It never really has. You know, we're talking about pivots and stuff, but this has been the way it goes forever. Like messaging, content, copy, like all of those are really what makes an advertiser great.
Yeah.
Down to the days of direct mailing.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're like, but I don't want to be a great advertiser, the good news is that it's actually not being a great like Jack is an absolute Facebook ads ninja. All right. Like he's so good at it and he knows all the tricks and, you know, pivots and like he's brilliant, you know? Sorry to talk about you like you're not here, Jack, but I just gotta say it.
I'm blushing.
I like to make him shy every once in a while on the podcast. but he's excellent at this. But you know what? Like his ninja skills can't do anything with terrible content. And if you have great content, his job is super easy. And honestly, you might be able to do as good a job as Jack if the content is unstoppable, right? Well, maybe not as great as Jack, but I giveth and I take away.
Definitely is great. Definitely is great.
Yeah. But you know what I'm saying? Like there will be less pressure. Like don't think about it like you have to be a great advertiser as in you have to run great ads. You have to have a great story. You have to have great content to support that story. And you have to have people who want to hear the story, you know? But that's not really advertising as much as it is being who you are as an artist and then figuring out how to communicate it. That's what you have to be really good at, not necessarily running ads, you know? And if anything, that should be enabling and something that makes you feel passionate about your creative process, because now everything that you do in that creative process is of interest to the right people. They want to know all about the whole thing. And if you make content that gives that to them, there's a lot less pressure on some of the other technical things that you have to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I stand by a philosophy that says like you're pushing buttons and being able to find targeting is not what makes a great advertiser. Mm-hmm. A great advertiser is someone who knows how to write copy and who knows how to put the right content in front of the people.
Exactly.
Then the targeting, then you can do all the button pushing you want. Or you can do not a lot of button pushing at all.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've said this before on plenty of podcast episodes. What musicians, artists have such I think they have such a leg up to be great at their marketing, so long as they let it be an extension of their creativity, and just having a little bit of knowledge of like the type of stuff that they should put in front of people. Knowing that they want to reach a certain type of fan, knowing who their fan base or what their fan base looks like.
Right.
And then taking that knowledge, taking that research, putting it down, making content, that really fits that resonates with those people. That's what makes a great advertiser and a great marketer. very little to do with button pushing, because that's all platform specific. That could change tomorrow.
Exactly.
Tomorrow Facebook ads could change, and they could say like, oh, we're now going to be search keyword based or something. Like we're only targeting people based on what they type in the search bar.
Right.
Or who knows? Facebook's rolling out a Spotify integration right now as we speak. Tomorrow, their artist targeting could be like, yeah, now you can only target people based on, specifically what they listen to on Spotify, which might make some people jump for joy. But what I'm getting at here is like this stuff changes all the time. So like your button pushing skills have nothing to do with it,
right.
or almost nothing to do with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. I mean, in the end, as artists, I think there's very few of us as creatives who create simply to enjoy it ourselves within the room that we created it in. You know what I mean? Like it's communication. Yeah. It's communicating a passion or a message, or it's an expression. It's meant to communicate. And really all the rest of the content is to communicate, and it's as Jack said, if it's an extension of the communication you execute as an artist, then you really can't go wrong. You just have to be it's all communication, Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I love that we talked about this, Jack, because I think it is something that is not spoken about enough. Especially, at Indepreneur here, we have tons of strategies and things that we recommend that are really, 1-2 step, and something that is just, it cannot be accounted for in any training is assessment of your assets and your ability to communicate,
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that we all need to, as creatives, concentrate on, and prioritize. So great idea.
So true.
Thanks for bringing this today.
Absolutely. This was a blast.
If you would like to interact with us, feel free to, if you're on YouTube, leave a comment here, say or ask whatever you like. We're also on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, of course. And we'd love to hear from you. And if you like our podcast, go ahead and leave us a review and let people know that we're not full of shit. That would be great.
Yeah.
In fact, use those words, please. They are not full of shit. I'm just kidding, but I know like 3 of you are going to do that now.
Do it.
Yeah, but thanks so much for joining us. I hope that you have some epiphany moments about your content over the next week or two. Give yourself some thought time. Really dive in on it. And if you're already really confident your content's killing it, great. Like, gosh, I know so many of us struggle with it. So congratulations. It's a feat.
Yeah, absolutely. Run it up.
Run it up. Go in the Facebook group. Share it. Be like, yo, I'm crushing with this content, and show everybody how it's done. We cheer for common winners around here. All right, so that's it for this week. Very excited to talk with you again next week. So come on back. We love y'all, indies. Have a great rest of your day.